Ferrari's hidden exploit just exposed the part of the 2026 rules Mercedes completely missed. The rule said the active wing had to move within 400 milliseconds, but it never said the wing had to stay upright. So Ferrari built the Macarena wing, a legal rear wing that rotates roughly 270 degrees, flips almost upside down on the straights, and attacks the exact place Mercedes had dominated all season. But Ferrari did not stop there. They helped force the compression ratio change that tightened Mercedes' engine advantage. Then they helped close the qualifying energy trick Mercedes and Red Bull had been using. 3 hidden rulebook attacks, 1 target, Mercedes' entire advantage. And when Hamilton won in Barcelona by 19.5 seconds, the truth became impossible to ignore. Ferrari is no longer just building a faster car. Ferrari is using the 2026 rules to dismantle Mercedes piece by piece. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Ferrari's hidden exploit hit Mercedes so hard, you have to understand what the 2026 rules were supposed to do. They were supposed to create a fresh start, a clean sheet, a season where every team had to forget old habits and rebuild its thinking from the ground up. The cars were lighter. The aerodynamics were active. The power units leaned far more heavily on electrical energy. The old drag reduction system was gone, and with it, the old logic of how cars attacked on the straights. Everything changed. And when everything changes in Formula One, the first battle is not fought at 200 miles per hour, is fought in the wording. That is where Ferrari found the opening. At first, Mercedes looked like the team that had read the new rulebook best. The W17 came out fast, efficient, and brutally effective in the exact phase that mattered most. Corner exit, energy deployment, straight line speed. The car did not just have pace. It had the kind of pace that protected itself. That is what made Mercedes so dangerous. A normal fast car can be attacked if you stay close enough, but the Mercedes made staying close feel almost impossible. Ferrari could survive the corners, sometimes even look strong through them, but once the road opened, the silver car started to escape. And that escape changed the race. If Hamilton or Leclerc could not stay close on the straight, they could not attack into the braking zone. If they could not attack, Mercedes could manage tires more easily. If Mercedes could manage tires, they could control strategy. And once a team controls strategy, the race starts to feel locked before the final stint even begins. That was the early Mercedes advantage. Not just speed, control. Ferrari knew it had to attack that control directly. But the problem was not simple. The SF-26 already had strengths. It could corner. It had a good base. It was not a slow car searching for life. The weakness was more specific, and that made it more painful. Straight line efficiency. Ferrari needed to stop Mercedes from turning every straight into an escape tunnel. That is where most teams would bring a normal rear wing upgrade. A little less drag, a little more efficiency, a slightly different balance between corner grip and straight line speed. Useful, but predictable. Ferrari did something far more aggressive. They looked at the active aero rules and asked what everyone else had assumed away. The rule said the wing could move. The rule said the transition had to happen within 400 milliseconds. But it did not say the open wing had to remain upright. That missing sentence became the exploit. Ferrari's rear wing did not just open like a conventional active flap. It rotated dramatically, roughly 270 degrees, until it was effectively almost upside down on the straight. That was not just a small adjustment to drag. It was a completely different way of thinking about how the car should cut through the air. It was strange, it was risky, and it was legal. That last part is what made it terrifying for Mercedes. If Ferrari had built something clearly illegal, Mercedes would have had an easy answer. Protest it, remove it, move on. But Ferrari had submitted the design and received confirmation that it complied with the regulations. Rivals could question the spirit, but the written rule had left the space open. Formula One history is full of moments like that. A team finds something everyone else believed was impossible, not because the rule allowed it loudly, but because the rule forgot to forbid it clearly. That is exactly what Ferrari did. And once the paddock understood the trick, the Macarena wing became more than a part. It became a symbol. It showed that Ferrari had not just copied Mercedes' approach to the new era. It had found a different path. A path aimed directly at the area where Mercedes had been strongest. The first test was not perfect, and that almost made the story more dangerous. Ferrari ran the concept in China, and the car immediately showed how difficult the idea was to control. A high-speed balance issue caused a spin, and the team withdrew the wing before sprint qualifying. Vasseur admitted they did not yet understand enough about the effects the wing had on the car. That could have been embarrassing. For a moment, it looked like Ferrari had chased a loophole that was too unstable to use. But the important thing is what happened next. They did not abandon it. That tells you Ferrari believed the concept had value. If the numbers had been worthless, the wing would have disappeared quietly. Instead, Ferrari kept developing. They refined the shape. They studied how the rotation affected balance. They worked on making the car stable enough for the wing to become a weapon instead of a risk. Then came the closed Monza running. Hamilton and Leclerc tested the revised version across 200 kilometers away from the public noise. The data was strong enough that Ferrari accelerated its plan and brought the wing forward earlier than expected. That was the real leak, not a secret document, not one dramatic confession. The data itself was the leak. Ferrari had seen enough to commit. And when a team commits to a radical concept after a difficult first test, it means the upside is too big to ignore. Leclerc reportedly felt improved balance and stability. Hamilton felt the car was sharper and more sensitive. That difference matters because it tells you the wing was giving Ferrari performance, but not free performance. The car was becoming more alive, more reactive, and more demanding. That is the kind of car that can punish an ordinary driver, but can also reward a great one. Hamilton's feedback became crucial. He had just joined Ferrari after years inside Mercedes. He understood what a championship car needed. He understood what Mercedes did well. And now he was helping Ferrari sharpen a concept designed to attack the very advantage his old team had built. That is what makes this story so uncomfortable for Mercedes. The exploit was technical, but the pressure was personal. Hamilton knew what Mercedes' dominance felt like from the inside. He knew that the W17's strength was not random. It came from systems working together. Aerodynamics, energy deployment, traction, race control. He also knew that if Ferrari could disrupt the straight-line escape, the whole Mercedes race model became less secure. The Macarena wing was not only about top speed. It was about changing where the fight happened. Mercedes wanted the fight to happen on the straight, where its energy deployment could protect the car. Ferrari wanted the fight to happen before that, through the corner, with the gap close enough that the Mercedes could not simply disappear. That is the hidden meaning of the exploit. Ferrari was not trying to beat Mercedes everywhere at once. It was trying to remove the one phase where Mercedes had been ending the battle. And if you remove a dominant team's safest phase, you force it to race differently. That is where the pressure spreads. Mercedes suddenly has to think about setups differently. If Ferrari gains straight-line efficiency, Mercedes may need to protect its own strengths more aggressively. If Ferrari stays closer at the end of the straight, Mercedes drivers may have to defend harder into braking zones. If Mercedes defends harder, it uses more tires. If it uses more tires, strategy becomes less comfortable. One aerodynamic loophole begins to affect the whole race. That is why the estimate of up to 10 kilometers per hour mattered so much. Even if Ferrari did not get the full gain every weekend, the direction was obvious. The team had found a way to reduce one of its biggest weaknesses without destroying the car's cornering foundation. That is the kind of development Mercedes could not ignore. Because early in a regulation cycle, direction is everything. A single successful concept can shape the entire grid. If rivals begin copying it, the team that found it first gains time, knowledge, and confidence. And once Red Bull started looking at its own version, the paddock message became clear. Ferrari's idea was not just weird, it was valuable. That changes how Mercedes has to respond. If Mercedes ignores the concept, Ferrari may keep improving it. If Mercedes copies it, Ferrari already has weeks of experience and data. If Mercedes protests it, Ferrari can point to legality. If Mercedes redesigns around it, that takes resources away from its original path. Every option costs something. That is what makes a hidden exploit so powerful. It does not only give your team performance, it forces rivals into uncomfortable decisions. They have to spend time understanding your idea. They have to decide whether to follow it or fight it. And while they do that, their clean development plan becomes more complicated. Ferrari had done exactly that. The SF-26 was no longer just chasing the W17. It was making Mercedes question whether its own interpretation of the rules had been too narrow. That is a brutal psychological blow, because Mercedes had started the season with the image of a team that understood 2026 better than anyone. Ferrari's wing challenged that image. It suggested that Mercedes had solved the obvious version of active aero, while Ferrari had found the more dangerous hidden version. And in Formula One, Being beaten by a hidden interpretation hurts more than being beaten by ordinary speed. Speed can be chased, and interpretation can redefine the whole development race. That is why the Macarena wing was only the beginning. It opened the first crack in Mercedes' confidence. It showed that Ferrari was willing to use the rulebook as aggressively as Mercedes. It proved that Maranello was not just bringing upgrades. It was bringing questions that forced the entire paddock to look again at what the 2026 rules really allowed. And once Ferrari started asking better questions, the battle changed completely. The next layer is where Ferrari's exploit becomes much bigger than a rear wing, because the Macarena wing was only the visible strike, the part everyone could see, the part rivals could photograph, the part fans could describe, the strange movement, the extreme rotation, the almost upside-down position on the straight. But Ferrari's real attack on Mercedes was not just aerodynamic, it was regulatory. And that is where the story becomes more damaging. Mercedes had built its early 2026 advantage on more than one pillar. The car had speed, yes, but that speed came from layers. Straight line efficiency, energy deployment, qualifying pace, power unit interpretation, traction out of corners, race control. It was not one weapon. It was a fortress. And Ferrari did not try to knock down the entire fortress in one hit. It started removing the pillars. The first pillar was straight line efficiency, and the Macarena wing attacked that directly. The second pillar was the power unit. Before the season even began, Ferrari, Audi, and Honda had raised concerns about Mercedes' compression ratio interpretation. The rule limited the compression ratio, but the measurement was being taken under cold conditions. That sounds minor, but in a racing engine, temperature changes everything. Metal expands, clearances shift. The same engine can behave differently when cold compared with when it is running at full racing temperature. Rivals believe Mercedes may have been gaining performance because of that difference. Not by cheating under the written rules, but by using a gap between how the rule was measured and how the engine operated in the race. That kind of advantage is exactly what Formula One teams search for.